Hi, everyone. This is Ali Hussein Kasim from Ali Talk State. In this week's weekly roundup of tech news across Africa and the globe, I'm covering 5 interesting stories. The first one is crypto meets mainstream finance, Ripple's bold move. The second one is exploring why Kenyan banks are thriving in the Democratic Republic of Congo while Nigerian banks are struggling. And I'm raising this issue because of the Access Bank acquisition of National Bank, which has been approved by the Central Bank of Kenya, but the Central Bank of Nigeria is still holding out on final approval and until either Access Bank improves its position in DRC or it shuts down its DRC operations. We'll come back to that story. Then we will delve a little bit deeper in last week's mobile money state of the industry report, this time just focusing on Africa. Second last of this story is Pitch Payments, a South African fintech focused on payments, acquisition of PayDunya. I hope I'm pronouncing that correct. A Senegalese payment fintech that operates in Anglophone Africa. Last but not least, we look at PayPal's partnership with TerraPay for real-time cross-border payments in Africa and the Middle East and Northern Africa, also known as MENA. So let's go straight into the story of Ripple's bold move in finance. As you may know, Ripple is one of the better known crypto companies in the world. I love what they say on their website. Building the internet of value. That's interesting. Building the internet of value. So Ripple has just announced, or a couple of days ago, announced the acquisition of a company called Hidden Road. What is Hidden Road? So Hidden Road they call themselves the Global Credit Network for Institutions. They are a brokerage for major financial transactions or credit. They are a clearinghouse that does or handles over 3 trillion of transactions of credit annually. 3 trillion. This bold step basically signals Ripple's deeper integration into mainstream finance. These key developments includes, number 1, global institutional growth. Ripple now gains access to over 300 institutional clients. And this is super important because many institutional clients are still very antsy about crypto. With the acquisition of Hidden Road, that is likely to change and very, very quickly. Secondly, XRP ledger integration. XRP is Ripple's crypto coin. So basically what this means is it enhances settlement speed and optimization across the crypto ecosystem and the regulated or traditional financial services ecosystem. Global expansion. This positions Ripple as a go-to for hedge funds, banks, and institutional investors worldwide. This move is reflecting a growing trend of crypto players acquiring traditional financial services players moving into crypto. It's clear to me that in the next couple of years, we are going to see a deeper integration between these two plays in financial services that seemed to be at loggerheads. One was basically set up to say, we're going to kill you guys. But quickly, we are starting to see that these two ecosystems of financial services are quite interdependent. Now we look at Kenyan banks. Why are they thriving in DRC? And why are Nigerian banks sort of struggling? Maybe I should extend this conversation and ask, why are Nigerian banks struggling generally in Eastern Africa? So from a Kenyan bank perspective, let's look at a couple of things. Smart acquisitions. As opposed to Nigerian banks that come in, especially in DRC, where they start to set up greenfield operations almost from scratch. That really means coming in, acquiring a license, and starting to build a bank from scratch. Kenyan bank says, no, wait a minute. We are targeting acquisitions. We are coming in. Two Kenyan banks have moved from zero to leadership. Top 3, top 5 banks in DRC through acquisitions. That's KCB and Equity Bank. So clearly, acquisitions as a strategy is working in DRC for Kenyan banks. Localized strategies, tailored services, government partnerships, focus on SME support have built trust and relevance. Fintech age. We are seeing that Kenya's banks seem to be a little bit more savvy when it comes to technology. So we are seeing there's something that the Kenyan banks seem to have when it comes to fintech age, the ability to leverage technology in financial services. Something that we thought or we think Nigerian banks can do, but they seem to lag behind when it comes to this. There's also potentially a cultural fit because of closeness of the geographical closeness. So Nigerian banks, on the other hand, struggle with macroeconomic instability and cultural misalignment. The big question, can Nigerian banks turn the tide through innovation and localized strategies? Maybe the bigger question would be, can the Central Bank of Nigeria be a little bit more patient with Nigerian banks as they search for the right formula to grow in this region of Africa? We're now looking at unpacking GSMA's State of the Industry Mobile Money Report for 2024, and this time a focus on Africa. Here are some nuggets of information for you to consider or to internalize globally. When you look at mobile money, 70% of global transaction value in mobile money comes from Africa. You want to ask yourself, how is this happening? How is it that Africa has a oversized share of mobile money? I mean, you have several reasons. The first one, of course, is the fact that there is a big percentage of the African population that has been unbanked from a traditional banking perspective. So mobile money sort of filled that gap because it required less access to physical branches, but access through just the mobile phone. Who are the key players in mobile money in Africa? Well, I see there are 4 key players. There are other players, but I want to focus on these 4 key players because out of these 4 key players, you probably see 80 to 90% of market share across. So let's start with M-PESA Africa, which is a joint venture between Safaricom in Kenya and Vodacom in South Africa. M-PESA Africa was formed to move and extend M-PESA's market beyond Kenya. How is this faring? That's a story for another day, but let's just leave it at this. M-PESA Africa is one of the leading, if not the leading mobile money player in Africa. Very close behind is MTN Mobile Money or MTN MoMo or MTN Fintech. They have just basically come out and said, we are moving MTN MoMo into a special purpose vehicle called MTN Fintech Group. And in that announcement, they also announced a $200 million investment by MasterCard. You can see the play here between MasterCard starting to really focus on mobile money. How is MTN doing? It's actually doing very well, considering the fact that M-PESA has had quite a number of years lead before MTN got into the mobile money market. So they are head to head. They're head to head. You're talking about just a couple of million difference between monthly active users of MTN and M-PESA. But here's an interesting anecdote. In its home market of South Africa, there's hardly any penetration of MTN mobile money. You may ask why. The answer is very simple. South Africa has had a very advanced and developed traditional financial services. So the use of cards, the use of traditional bank accounts has been ubiquitous in South Africa for quite a while. So there was really, people never saw a need for mobile money. Recently, MTN has gone deep into the inner cities, or what South Africans call the townships, to try and drive mobile money usage. Your guess is as good as mine how this is going to pan out in the next couple of years. Then we look at Orange Money. Orange Money is dominant and prevalent in Francophone Africa, mostly because it's Francophone, Orange is French. But beyond Francophone, Orange Money is very negligible. But this is very interesting to note. It's probably the only mobile money player in Africa that has launched a digital bank. And we'll cover that in the next couple of weeks. How is Orange Money's digital bank faring? Last but not least, Airtel Money. Struggling in some countries, dominant or very active in Central African countries. They have also, MasterCard has also invested $200 million into them. They also have a standalone business called Airtel Money. So we are starting to see the mobile money players, the telcos, spinning out their mobile money plays. There are two other players that are not telco-led that are going to be interesting to watch. The first one is Senegal's Wave, which is an offshoot from Sendwave, a leading remittance play, which was sold a couple of years ago to a bigger fintech. Can't remember the name. PalmPay in Nigeria, making mobile money accessible via USSD users without smartphones. What's a big impact for mobile money in Africa? 400 million Africans now use mobile money regularly to access formal financial services. That has grown over the years. You're talking about 1.4 billion African people, but only 400 million using mobile money. So there's still 800 million to be brought into mobile money or traditional financial services play, because mobile money in Africa is really now about traditional financial services. It has contributed 190 billion to sub-Saharan Africa's GDP in 2024, and it fuels fintech innovation in credit, savings, and payments. In fact, in my country, Kenya, it is the de facto financial services rails. Even banks cannot claim to have a digital banking strategy without M-PESA smack in the middle of that strategy. So what's next? We are starting to see the rise of super apps integrating more financial services like M-PESA's super app, PalmPay. We are starting to see MTN starting to play in that space. Quite interesting. And we are also starting to see, as I've mentioned earlier, the growth of non-telco disruptors. Last but not least, we are going to quickly see, with players like Zone in Nigeria getting regulated by the Central Bank of Nigeria and other regulators, we are going to start seeing integration of blockchain and crypto for cross-border transactions. In fact, we're already seeing Africa has partnered with Ripple and partnered with Circle in the US to enable cross-border transactions using stablecoins. So that space is starting to blur very quickly. Now we look at Peach Payments' bold expansion into Francophone with PayDunya acquisition. Now, let me step back a bit here and speak about the perceived fragmentation of payments across Africa. One of the things that I love to discuss is the fact that even us Africans sometimes forget that Africa is not one country. It's 54 different countries under one continent called Africa. We are not homogeneous, contrary to popular belief. So a South African payment player coming in to acquire a Francophone payment player is starting to be quite interesting. It's starting to bridge Francophone Africa and Anglophone Africa. Don't ask me why we call ourselves Francophone and Anglophone. That's, colonial baggage that we really need to shed off, but that's a story for another day. Without going into much detail, the fact of the matter is Pitch is starting to speak about a one API. Every fintech's golden thought process is towards one API, from Cellular to Flutterwave to Stitch to many other fintechs. Their golden strategy is one API. So this integration between these two big players from Francophone Africa and Anglophone Africa is starting to see that dream coming closer to reality. Last but not least, the announcement on April 15th, just yesterday, PayPal partnership with Therapy to enable instant cross-border fund transfers across Africa and the Middle East is tackling a long-standing issue like high fees, slow settlements, and limited financial access. In fact, let me tell you something. PayPal is a big problem in Africa. They can shut you down in 1 minute just because they don't like or you've not done something or other. We have seen many Kenyans having problems despite partnership with a bank like Equity Bank. So the hope and prayer is that with this partnership, a lot of this nonsense, allow me to use that term, a lot of this nonsense will go. I was speaking with a good friend of mine who is a regulator in Somalia just yesterday and say, by the way, we can't even access PayPal. And Somalia is not on the blacklist of global financial services, contrary to what we may believe. So these conversations, we need to have them frankly, and we need to make sure that we open up this ecosystem in Africa for Africans across the world, in and out, for cash in, for cash out, for playing within the global fintech ecosystem. So the key highlights for this is global reach. TerraPay connects 210 plus, sending 144 receiving countries, now integrated with PayPal's vast network. By the way, FYI, there's an interesting remittance company that you may not have ever heard of, Juba Express, owned by interesting gentleman who started Premier Bank called Jibril. Juba Express connects you to 140 countries instantly. So in my humble opinion, this is really not news because the guys who've been doing it quietly, chiniamaji, as we like to say. Seamless transfers, users can send and receive funds in real time between mobile wallets, bank accounts, and PayPal balances. Obviously, it will empower users, especially gig workers. What's the impact? We're talking about collaboration, probably it will also create some pressure for local fintechs and banks to innovate, offering faster, cheaper, and more accessible cross-border solutions. With the digital payments market in the Middle East and Africa expected to hit 422 billion by 2030, this is positioning these players for interesting snack of the fintech market in Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, I want to close this week's update and looking forward to talking to you next week. Asanteni sana.